there's been a lot of discussion around the city and particularly investment within that. Maybe let's just start with a round of introductions. Really super panel here for you today. Let's start with you, Nils.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Richard. My name is Nils Hübener. I'm the CIO and board member of CORESTATE Capital Group, located in Frankfurt and Luxembourg, but also active across Europe. We are strongly based both in private debt business and also in real estate equity investment management via a couple of group investment management entities, and also with a strong focus on operational real estate. So we have our own brand in micro living, student housing and service departments, but also active in all other sector classes.
Great, thanks very much. Oliver.
Yeah, hi, morning again. Yes, Oliver Kummerfeldt. I'm the dedicated analyst for continental Europe at Schroders in our direct real estate business. As you know, Schroders is one of the largest listed UK asset managers, with about sort of 500 billion under management. And real estate falls into the part of the of our larger and growing private asset offering, which has about 20 billion euros of management, and that's sort of funds, investment trusts, separate accounts. And we continue to grow. We just added a debt function. We bought a share in a business in Asia. So it's very exciting times, and we just follow sort of what our clients telling us in sort of their appetite for private assets.
Great, thanks very much. Daniel.
Hi, so I'm Daniel Harris. I am the head of investments for Europe for CAIN International. We are a real estate business that invests in equity, debt and private equity. So we invest in operating businesses, and we do that generally in 2 jurisdictions. So we do it across the US, and we have quite an interesting perspective on the markets here, because obviously we're seeing both sides of the pond and obviously across very different parts of the sector. The debt, equity, and the more operational side.
Great, thanks very much, Daniel. I just wanted to pick up first of all. I mean, maybe let's start with you, Nils. I mean, we've seen the COVID-19 health crisis has brought a changing roles, particularly in the city, into sharp focus. Do you think that the pandemic has created a significant challenge to cities and therefore investment in a way in terms of resilience?
Well, yes and no, Richard. I mean, clearly, the challenging bit for cities in the crisis is that I think that a couple of the factors that actually make the city the place to be, both for growth and for innovation, and in our view also going forward for investment, is obviously been strongly challenged in the crisis, because in the end the city is built on, well, depth and activity and exchange and all of that. So clearly, I mean, just taking the extreme examples of the large metropolises that completely depend on mass transport. Even, I don't know, entering the office building, you need to get an amount of people into lifts and all of that. In the end, it's all challenged by density. Yeah. And so that's, I think, the major impact where people have now distanced and are actually avoiding that density. That in the end is the very ingredient of the city's success. I think at the same time, everyone now, after a year more or less in lockdown, and Oliver, I think you were saying you've been in that room for 1 year. I hope you left in the meantime, at least a little bit. But after a year of that, I think everybody's also seeing how much they are missing the kind of exchange activity that is actually built on that city density. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And Oliver, we've all been in the same room actually for a whole year, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think this will lead in some ways to a reassessment of the factors that make a winning city or an investable city?
Again, yes and no. Look, I think COVID is not the end of the city. I think, cities will remain the place, where jobs are, where people meet, where people do business. It's where entertainment is, where the institutions are. It's where education is, infrastructure is located, and it will sort of remain the center for the knowledge industry, where it's all about sharing the ideas. Undoubtedly, and Nils, related to that, cities will change, and they have done that for the last 100 of years. So I have faith in the city now. Resilience is something that was already an ingredient for what we, I guess, refer to a winning cities. Having a diverse economy that is based sort of on the knowledge economy, having sort of employment growth. And if you look at some of the cities across Europe, and I always like to take the European perspective, there have been a couple of cities in the Nordics, in Switzerland, in Germany, in the Netherlands that actually have seen GDP in 2020 just been falling by 2.5%, maybe 4%. They've shown incredible resilience as cities already. Now, of course, some of it is related to the stringency of lockdowns, how much sort of financial aid, support they could give from governments. But I also think there is a resilience in sort of the underlying economic structure and a diverse economy and a knowledge-based economy that has made these cities successful through this crisis. The other element that I think will be coming into focus more is now how can these cities react to crises like we've just seen. And I think this will be something that investors increasingly pick up. And I think that falls a little bit into the area as well of, the quality of life and sort of the quality of city investment and city governance.
Yeah, that's interesting. And of course, if you've got any questions, the joy of it being live is that you can, of course, ask them and we will try to answer them. So feel free to put those into the chat or into the Q&A, which you'll see just on the right hand side of your screen there. And we will, of course, try to answer those as best we can. Daniel, just picking up on that point, you mentioned there that you've got, that there's exposure to global cities, gateway cities. I suppose, have you seen any of those aspects around resilience changing your thoughts or strategies around which cities you're looking at and what the key ingredients are for success? You may be on mute there, Daniel.
Sorry, apologies. You would have thought after a year that wouldn't happen anymore, but it still does. That's what I'm looking forward to, about getting back into the office. No more meetings. But we've typically tried to invest across Europe and across the US in larger capital and gateway cities. I am a massive believer in heading back to cities. Walking around London at the moment is extremely sad, right? Sad for businesses, for the shopkeepers, for everybody. But I agree with the comments before. Mass transportation, getting people in and out of these cities is key to their revival. But in the EU, we've announced, the easing of lockdown, and restaurants are packed from the date they can open. Theatres are desperate to be open. So I think all this will recover very quickly and far stronger than people think, because we are all social creatures and we want to be together. But, the perspective I would give is that cities will change, as Oliver just said. So in the US, we are invested in New York, Miami, Los Angeles, Boston. Miami has seen a massive upsurge where people are coming from what you would call those traditional cities of high-rise buildings in New York and moving to Miami. The best quarter, 6 months of leasing of our office buildings and sales of our residential projects in Miami. Why? Because people want to say, I still need to be in a city. I still need everything city offers me, but maybe I don't want to be in that city. Maybe that city is more appealing than this one. And I think we've seen that in the US, particularly with Miami. And I suppose the question will be, how does that filter through to Europe? Does a city like do better than a city like Madrid, where there is more open space? The buildings are designed, it's a different way of life. So I think cities are, key to our survival as a human culture. But different cities may come out of this differently because people's habits will change.
Yeah. Daniel, I think that's actually a really interesting point, because I feel that, obviously use the word gateway city. And I think it's really interesting to see under all the elements and changes that you just mentioned in terms of people having a choice. Yeah, because I think one large impact of the crisis is that people have realized, yes, they are missing the exchange, they're missing the city, they need the activity. But they also realize that, well, that bit that actually kept us alive through the crisis has actually been our ability to be working more remote and to be more flexible. I don't think that will be replacing the desire for the other requirements. But I think people have realized, oh yeah, I do have much more choice. And my choice is maybe could be linked to where should that office really be. Yeah, and because, yes, I still want to be in the office once in a while. Does it have to be in the city of London or in downtown Frankfurt or La Défense? Does it have to be in Manhattan, or maybe why not in another type of gateway city? So I think the whole idea could be, in my view, that because of the power of choice, that there will be a whole new class of places emerging that already have a lot of ingredients of a strong city today, but have also the benefit of actually being enough gateway to be attracting enough critical mass and being connected, reachable. I think that choice will change maybe the relative attraction of the mega metropolis versus the next tier, and maybe even the next tier after that of cities. That could play strong in that game.
It's an interesting point as well in terms of, the whole going back to the office and working from home debate. The commute time and the size of the city, I think, play a vital role here. It's the difference if you have to be 45 minutes on a packed tube, or if you can cycle into the office in 15 minutes. It's a difference if you have 11 square meters in the office, or if you have a nice office where you have 20 square meters. And I think the other interesting thing is, again, coming back to maybe providing a European perspective. It's the different attitudes also to working from home. You look at countries like Sweden, where you can look at the numbers from Eurostat, where they say 30% of the workforce, so not just office workers, but the entire workforce, says that they sometimes work from home. In Germany, that's just 7 to 8%. In Spain, it's just 3.5%. Now, of course, it has something to do with the composition of the economy. Industries or economies which are highly service-driven will ultimately have more options for people to work from home. But I think there's a cultural element as well. And I think there's also an element of sort of the city network within a country that will come at play here in terms of how many people will work from home, how much they will do that, and where will they actually be.
And do we think that this is going to broaden, I suppose, the opportunities in what might have been seen as kind of secondary cities, i.e. non-capital cities? I mean, Daniel mentioned there about Miami taking a boost. You also mentioned there Barcelona versus Madrid, those kinds of things. Do you think that is likely to happen, or do you think it's going to be more that people will be moving towards the suburbs of the larger cities rather than to a different city? I don't know if have you seen anything in terms of that, Daniel?
Yeah. I think the US is very different because it has so many big cities. It's one country, everyone speaks the same language. If you take the UK and take UK and France, London and Paris, right? Lyon is a secondary city. It's never going to rival Paris. Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, Bristol, they're great cities. They're never going to rival London. So in that respect, Europe's more challenged because it is the countries are dominated by major cities. Germany, obviously, is slightly different, where you don't have this major dominant single city. And Spain, for example, have these two cities. So I think in some ways, some of the changes that you've seen across the US, you're not necessarily going to be able to sort of just so simply. But I do believe my view is that some point, and I think there will be a couple of winners that you weren't, right, and they'll probably come from those other countries. I don't expect that city to appear out of the UK or out of London, but you might find in Germany, for example, there is a city that really prospers, or a Switzerland, or Barcelona in Spain. Something comes up which was like, oh, people like that city more now for all these reasons. It's that cultural change. So I think it will be a winner that we don't necessarily predict today.
Okay, so the chance for everybody is to try and predict what that one is, Daniel, obviously.
and Richard, in the end, I think it's more about coexistence of those different concepts. Yeah, I fully agree with you, Daniel. I mean, there's no rival in France or Paris, and there's no rival for London or anything. But I don't think that will necessarily hugely matter in the future in the same amount as it maybe does now. I mean, even on the French example, yeah, you're right. I mean, Lyon is, considering the size and depth, it is not a super connected place at the moment, but you're just 1 hour away from Paris by high-speed train, and it's I mean, in the end, if you only go back to your defense office twice a week, you start to have a choice. Yeah, I think that's what the change mechanisms are going to be. Germany obviously is different because you have really 5-6 cities that are more or less breaking it up and are kind of quasi gateway cities, but none of them with the global dominance you would have in London or Paris or New York. But I feel that your question, Richard, in terms of suburbs and I think there is both a kind of a potential for the next tier large cities that have elements of gateway, and also within the major metropolises, I do feel that people will make choices that will be impacted by choice and flexibility, and that could be boosting smaller cities near to the conurbation. Could even, to a certain degree, be a further push to certain suburbanization. I think all of that is going to be happening at the same time. I don't think it's going to be exclusive, in my view.
I sometimes, if we've been talking a lot, I guess, what, is sort of, the office worker or the knowledge worker. And sometimes when you think about a city, I wonder, how many people actually have that choice and flexibility, and how many people, can actually sort of do that. Is it, the young family with 2 kids that need to go to school, or is it the policemen and the nurses? Is it sort of the graduates that start a career? Is it the students that go to university? Sometimes I'm a little bit, I think about how big will the impact be, and who actually has all that flexibility that we talk about. I mean, we are privileged in the way we can work from, I guess, anywhere. We've just been forced into this, but we had relationships with colleagues, and it does work. But I always wonder how big the pool is of people who have this flexibility to move.
Mm-hmm. Oliver, I agree. I think it's obviously you have to make a choice between, say, knowledge workers and non. Yeah, but at the same time, I think the group may not be that huge, but it's often that very group that is actually dominantly changing or forming, influencing places and the dynamics within these places. So
yeah.
If you change within that, maybe not huge but important group, a certain amount, I think you have an impact. You have less people definitely wanting to live, I don't know, in Chelsea and Kensington, because they may say, actually, same amount of money, I buy myself a palace a bit further down the road, and I only come into town twice a week. Yeah? And if you do that a little bit here and there, I do feel it will have an impact.
Yeah, I think one of the key things to watch in the future is, which cities are able to attract, the talent, the tech workers, the knowledge workers. Yeah. I think that's, that's just key. Which cities can sort of provide, the right environment for those, attract these people.
Yeah, I think that's
just remember, I was going to say, Richard, remember, you look at the COVID situation, and I just know the statistics in the UK, right? 99% of all deaths and hospitalizations are above 50. And of that 99, probably 90% of it above 70. So if you think about the majority of people who work in shops, offices, the service industries, they're under 50. So those people, and they're the ones who socialize and go out more, and so they are going to be the key to the revival of the city, the under 50s, and they have not been materially affected through through the illness of COVID, right? So when you talk about people getting on packed trains, there's a cultural shift. I went out for a run this morning, and I think on a very simple terms, at some point you forget squeezing into a packed train. When I go for a run, people cross road to avoid you, because that's what we've done for a year. So forget squeezing in, standing next to somebody like this, or reaching for the bar and you're barging through. When am I going to run on the road and someone's not going to cross the road to avoid me, right? That's that mindset quite strange at the moment, where you look at everybody in a very different, afraid of human contact. Look, and I think obviously we've had human contact forever, so we will get it back. But there's a massive cult. You can't underestimate. I think I'm very pro offices, very pro. Let's get life back to normal as much as possible. Sitting like this is not real, but there is a huge amount of anxiety, right? And there will be, like anything, when new technology comes along, there's those people that take it up instantly, and I'll be the person that's straight on the road, straight out to the bar but there are other people that you're going to have to take them on a journey. And the biggest example is the way people cross a road to avoid you at the moment. That's got to change. And so I think we are. I believe we'll generally go back to the way we were. There will be some habits will change, but there is a huge amount of anxiety around that amongst people, and you see it every day. And it's going to take a while for that to change. It won't be overnight.
No, that's interesting. Of course, people used to cross the road to avoid me pre-pandemic, so that's not changed for me.
It's very ESG.
What's quite interesting around?
Maybe it's the head and the beard. That's what does it. Maybe it's something like that.
But Richard, you do raise an interesting point, and Daniel, in terms of I guess the future mobility in cities. And you've seen sort of a pickup in cycling, and more in the UK, in London, for example, cycling lanes being opened up for people to use rather than use public transport. I think that's something probably to stay, and you can see how cities move forward with their sustainability agenda. Lots of European cities, which a lot of people seem to overlook, are phasing out diesel cars and petrol cars in their city centers in the not too distant future. We are 8, maybe 10 years away from that, and that'll really sort of change also the mobility in our city and how people will move around.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It was in actually in the presentation this morning from Sean Cooley. He was looking at the sort of mass transportation, electric, automatic driving vehicles, which would act really like taxis and just move people around, almost like a minibus in a way, and that could be a real game changer. Just in the same way that that the first form of automatic transportation, a lift, changed cities in terms of the height that buildings could be, which I thought was an interesting point. I just wanted to pick up as well, Nils. Does that mean we're going to see more of these sort of 15-minute cities, or within larger cities, urban areas, city quarters, where nearly everything is in a space that people can access more easily?
Again, I think it's going to be both on different scales. I think it's on one side the desire to have this kind of mix and the availability of different activities and users and contacts within a certain amount of say limited travel and or walking time. I think it is on one side to a certain degree driving the smaller places that are connected and winning cities in themselves, because it makes them attractive. and there's a lot of them in Europe, I think, in my view. And within the bigger ones, yes, I agree that there is the experience, and it's probably accelerated by COVID rather than, it's not new. I mean, it's been there before. People wanted to be integrated and have a short walk down to whatever pub, shopping, job. Yeah. I think it's accelerated that desire because people see that they can't be seen isolated in the middle of nowhere. That's certainly another pushback into what we all, and Daniel, I think you were giving a good example of it, desiring to get back to normality, that is being accelerated. And I think it's both driving the city government's drive to accelerate these kind of urban development targets for the bigger places. And yes, if you break it down to an asset class, again, Richard, I agree. It's certainly another supporting factor for mixed use and on a larger scale for city quarter developments, because the experience being, if I can work and live and support myself within a short stroll or a short cycle trip, it is desirable. Yeah, and I think it's going to be pushing for those for this asset class again.
It's also quite sustainable, isn't it? You know, and cities can only survive, you know, this kind of growth if they are sustainable and they keep livable and resilient.
Yeah, I agree.
And do we expect to see more things like, I mean, it's been interesting, some of the work we've been doing covering areas like life sciences, data centers, those sorts of things that hadn't really been on the radar so much until the last kind of 18 to 12 months, really. And a kind of trend for those to becoming part of a city in a way, as opposed to being, you know, on a campus further out of town, that actually these are becoming integrated parts of the city. Do you see that happening more?
I mean, maybe to just jump in there first, but I mean, I think that there's a big difference between the classes you mentioned. I mean, obviously, data center, yes, they are growing and there is huge demand, and they are coming up where there is energy and connectivity. It's very simple. So they're certainly not necessarily relying on the urban environment, but will they be somewhere close to major centers or where usually you have your data nodes as well? Yes, they are. And Frankfurt is a good example, which is in terms of data transfer, biggest node in the world globally. And yes, there are a lot of them coming up as much as you can, because in the end, they're obviously colliding with what may be other urban interests, because they're probably not the most responsive type of buildings, put it like this. Yeah. I think for the other questions in terms of life science and maybe more research-led space, I do feel that will become more integrated, because within, yes, you do need a certain level of connectivity, and there is certainly a hub factor for these type of users, because you often would want to cooperate and integrate with other people in that sector. Does it have to be in a kind of a suburban park environment? I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of things happening there that, in my view, can make sense in a more integrated way. And therefore, if you have a Stadtquartier, can it include not just classic office space, but maybe some more, be it tech or laboratory or more robust multi-use type of activity space? I think it can. And there already are good examples where sometimes even on the drive, forced by the cities or demanded by the city governments, people are building more activity space, yeah, and that could be multi-purpose in the end. And I think that clearly is in my view, an interesting strategy.
Yeah. I think we've also been given an interesting opportunity through sort of, you know, the changes we've seen to the retail sector. because a lot of this retail space is sort of city center, and many of this space is just disappearing. And in other countries, we've just seen sort of the collapse of the department store crisis is just sort of accelerating that. And I think this is a challenge for landlords, it's a challenge for city councils, it's a challenge for people who work in retail. But I think it's also an opportunity to take control of that space and do something new with it. And I'm thinking, it could be sort of a lab space, research space, but you could also think about, well-needed residential space, senior living, student housing, medical centers, city administration, because they're often in these central, well-accessible areas. So, there is an opportunity that this crisis brings for investors as sort of the city fabric changes.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Well, look,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think I agree completely with Oliver that the biggest challenge today, these major cities, is what is the retail industry. I'm going to go back to central London in a few weeks' time. Go back to the office, and it'll be slowly. The sandwich shop. Forget the smaller shops, the sandwich shops, the dry cleaners. Which ones of those have stayed open? If you walk down Oxford Street, 50% of those shops are gone. Okay, let's not even get into the secondary city shopping centres where you saw a shopping centre in Coventry that was sold at 50 million 6 years ago, was sold for 4.5 million in an auction. Okay, if you look at Coventry, let's take Coventry. That centre has been devastated, right, by what's gone on with that shopping centre. It's no longer a hub. But just take Oxford Street. As you said, all the big department stores are gone. Major Icon is going to go down from 4 stories to probably 2. Debenhams is gone. Topshop is gone. Forever 21 is gone. All these stores are gone. And so I think the problem the issue that's going to be here is that when we all go back to the cities, they're not going to look the same. We'll all go back. Like, you can't just sit there and go, no one's going back to offices. We're all going to basically go back to our offices, and some people work from home, but you can't just get out of your office lease in 3 minutes, right? So whatever change is going to happen to offices, it's going to be a very period of change, right? But the retail are devastated. Now, that's going to be a terrible shock, I think, to lots of people when they go back. But that's also going to create huge innovation. Like what Nils said, because you've had 10 years of the decline of retail, that all this would have happened over the next 10 years as these businesses were unsustainable, as we moved online. They would have fallen one by one, and another shop would have come in and taken that. But what you've got now is devastation. So the problem with that is you have to deal with it all together. You've had 10 years of retail business collapsing in 12. Yep. And I think just take this one street of Oxford Street, it's going to be devastating. And that example of Coventry is happening all across the secondary cities in the UK. And I presume it's happening across all the secondary cities across Europe. So I think the biggest challenge cities face is, what do you do with this space? I think we're missing so many of the arguments saying, are people going back to offices? Because 70%, 80%, yes, they are, right? What may change over the next 10 to 20 years is a very difficult thing to predict, right? Do people work more suburban? Do they have smaller city centres, bigger suburban? But those things are going to take years. But the devastation to the high street, people will sit there, they'll come into their office in 2 months' time and they'll go, oh my God, none of the shops are here anymore. How do we deal with that? And that, I think, is the biggest challenge facing cities, particularly UK. So I can't talk so much, but UK has been destroyed, retail industry.
But huge opportunity.
Yeah.
The rebuilding of these cities is going to be the story of the next 10 years. That is going to be the story of the next 10 years.
I agree, and I think it's again, I think it's both obviously a huge opportunity in terms of what you can do within the fabric of cities. What can you accelerate? Not only the decline and destruction, Daniel, as you said, also the resurgence ideally can accelerate. I think it will also be to a certain degree maybe an accelerator to the push for other places, because I mean, if people realize that not only do they still have to come into the tube to get to north of Oxford Street, but then Oxford Street doesn't exist anymore. It's going to be a pretty rude awakening. Yeah, and so your desire to then say, well, I'd rather maybe actually try to be somewhere else for half the rent. I think it's an opportunity, but it will take time, and that period, I think also other places will be using to try to strengthen themselves and to become places of choice. Yeah, so it's tough for anything that really relies on the attractiveness of these users to be partly justifying also the kind of rather detrimental side of transport and cost and everything that you would also have in bigger places. Yeah.
One other element, that I think this whole crisis brings is the opportunity for impact investing. And I know, it's a big trend. Lots of our investors, pushing us towards it. And I think, a crisis like this just opens the door to that wide open, in helping city centers to rebuild, in providing sort of, affordable housing, in sort of creating public realm with maybe surplus office space, or converting, unliked or unused office space for other uses like residential. So again, of course, it is terrible, but looking at it from an investment point of view, I think there are opportunities.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see in the news. Again, it was a UK one, but Capital and Regional working with Reef Technologies to try and change some of the, doing a test on some of their centres to be able to make those much more mixed use community hubs rather than pure retail, which was interesting, I think. And that point around impact, Oliver, also came up yesterday. We had a session on impact and ESG. And just in terms of the cities, do we think that therefore key aspects like affordability, those kinds of things are going to be much more key going forward?
I do. Look, I think that, and I think the whole idea of making, these city centres more mixed use, more desirable, more hospitality, pushing into the hospitality industry, because we think that's where the boom's going to come over the next few years, right? Where people want to experience, they want to socialise, they want to experience, because shopping done online. So the idea of everyone's going to still go Christmas shopping, right? These big things, but day to day, people are going, it's so much more of it's online. And I think the experiential thing is what people want. But, I would love there to be, far more residential in the centre of London that's affordable. But it's going to be very challenging to build affordable residential because land prices are still going to be so high. So just how do you get that residential into those cities to give them the vibrancy and the replacement of the lot? Because all these shops can't be replaced by bars and restaurants and hotels. They need to be replaced by other things as well. And how do you deal with that when land prices are still going to remain very high?
I think it's a real. In the end, it's a political question people have to answer on a city level and on a country level even. Looking at the both opportunity that is caused by the structural change and also by the challenge to revive city centres, I do feel that there is actually a real opportunity to also include overall more housing in central locations, and in that way also include more affordable housing. A lot of the cities in Germany, as an example, if you build a large Stadtquartier and there is a lot of residential in that, which is clearly required and also desirable from an investment point of view, you will normally, in most cases, also be forced to include reduced rent and affordable housing. And I think in the end, it is very much what is required to actually be creating this living urban environment. Because if you do that on a large scale, you build the city by just adding block by block of high rent apartments, you will not have a sustainable fabric. So I think it's an opportunity, and both for us as potential investors, because we will want to invest in product that is robust and long-term, and it's a huge opportunity for the cities themselves to kind of reinvent themselves. But they have to take the opportunity, and yeah, you probably can't just leave it to a pure well, build whatever you want. Yeah, that won't work.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely key in the way that where are key workers going to live? Will the nurses, the policemen, the firemen, will they all just live somewhere in suburbia and then have long commutes to come in? The people who provide energy and so on. And if you start to push more and more people out, if they get priced out, this is, in my opinion, detrimental for a city when it comes to elements like crime and so on. So I think you have no choice, and there is a demand for it, and if you do it right, you get a pretty stable income stream. You do something good, and you still make money on it. So.
And we're relatively short on time now, but I just wanted to just pick up on one thing. Do we think that there's going to be either a short or longer term advantage for some cities based around the rollout of the vaccine? Do you think that there will be a boost for UK cities because the UK seems to be faster at the moment than continental Europe? Israel first, moving faster. Is that just going to be a really temporary blip, and actually everybody will be sort of on an even keel by the end of the year anyway? How do you see that?
I mean, I see it as a. Please, Daniel, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you go ahead.
Good. I mean, I see this more as a temporary situation, because I mean, clearly there is a difference of a couple of months, which is a lot in this environment, and then certainly good for the ones that are faster and not so good for the ones that are slower. But we're talking about a difference of 2, 3, 4 months. If we talk about, say, the developed world, yeah, I think that's the big one actually in question, is that for now, yes, we are hoping to be seeing a normalization with vaccination in Europe and in the US and some of the other stronger countries globally, economically still stronger countries. But I mean, to be really going truly back to also, why is New York and London and Paris, why are they global cities? Is because not only because they are important to Europe and their European neighbors, they're important globally. And can they be important globally if the rest of the world is not vaccinated, if the rest of the world may be having one mutant after the other? I think that's our biggest challenge, because coming first now is nice, but unfortunately it won't be the solution. And for winning cities, in my view, it's for all of us together. We have to have a very, very high interest that our international cities can remain international cities, which is not about Europe. Yeah, and it's much bigger than that.
Daniel, did you want to pick that up?
Yeah, no, I would just say, look, I agree. I think it's going to be very short term. Whether the UK is all vaccinated, the UK and the US, are way ahead of Europe. We'll all be vaccinated by, the UK just announced today, anyone over 50 can go and get a vaccine now. They'll all be done over 50s, which is 99% of risk people, within about 3. And the US is on a similar timeline. So Europe is lagging behind. So I think that there will be obviously a massive boost to the UK and the US economy in the next 3 to 6 months, which Europe probably will not. But it will come back. The problem you have, I think, is the longer these things take to come back, the longer some of the I think I agree with Nils as well, is that this is a global problem. You have to, how will we travel around the world? And I think some of the countries have everyone holds up Australia, New Zealand, zero COVID. I think it's very clear that there is no zero COVID. So as soon as those guys open their border, if you take the fact that the vaccine is, let's say, 95% effective and 90% of people take it, right? Children aren't going to take it at the moment. You're going to have COVID in your country. It will typically affect those that are weakest and oldest. And people, Melbourne, when they get 1 case, how do they open up And funnily enough, I think those cities have a bigger challenge of opening up, and also some of the Asian countries as well, because they've taken a zero COVID strategy, which has proved to, be very effective in reducing deaths and reducing illnesses in the last 12 months. But it's not a workable long-term strategy, because it's like saying we have a zero flu strategy. Just not deliverable. It's just not deliverable. So I think the world will face some challenges over the next 12 to 18 months. And I think those countries that are prepared, COVID is just like flu, it comes and goes, and have a very successful vaccination program will probably do better. But I think the difference in Europe and the UK, it's probably a 3 to 6 month issue.
Okay, great. We're just very short on time, so just a final roundup to everybody, really, which is, I suppose, bearing this in mind, and we've talked a bit about various opportunities, but what do you think the kind of key opportunities are for 2021 and beyond, looking particularly at this kind of investing in cities strategy? Let's start with you, Daniel.
I think the city centres and offices have been oversold far too much. And I think you're going to see people that have investments have held their nerve, and those that are willing to make investments will probably outperform, because I think the market will recover pretty quickly. So I think if you can find the right particular offices, but also the ability to buy up and reposition these cities, is going to be a huge opportunity.
Great, very good. Oliver.
Look, I think the philosophy and the focus on what you call a winning city and looking for these ingredients is still very valid as an investment proposition. And I think that is the opportunity in sort of, identifying which cities will deliver this sort of better growth, more sustainable growth, which cities can attract the talent, and which cities sort of can lead a sustainable development, that makes a city still sort of livable. So finding these cities, and they don't have to be, and we had this at the start of our discussion, they don't have to be the cities we know now. Maybe there is a second layer of cities, that will emerge from that, and I'm pretty sure there are. I think there are great examples already. And identifying those locations will be absolutely key. And I think in those cities, you will make successful investments. And I think there's a huge opportunity in helping existing cities in terms of managing this change. Any sort of change in the fabric to our cities is an opportunity, in my opinion, for a real estate investor.
Yeah.
Super, that's great. Nils.
Fully agree with you, Oliver. I think really those are, in my view, those are the two key elements. I think we have to understand that there is a choice, and that people have a choice, and that maybe that understanding of what are the choices and how they're being weighted one to the other may have been influenced in the last year. I think they are. That's one impact, and the other one, I think, is really in the challenge into the fabric lies opportunity. Do cities need to revive their city centers? Yes, they do have. Right, Daniel, I think some of these things are probably being oversold at the moment. In addition to that, there is political pressure to be more responsive to also change requirements. And I think that together is an opportunity also for investors.
Thanks very much, Nils. Thanks, Oliver. Thank you, Daniel. And I know there were issues with your Wi-Fi this morning that were unexpected. So thanks very much for struggling through with that. That's great. Really interesting to get your views.